I believe that we are live now. So, folks, if you hear us, Gabor, say hello.
Hello.
So, if you hear us, please write in comments something, thumbs up, give us some green light so we know that we are on air. Yeah, there's 15 seconds. I hear us both. Cool, me too. There's probably, yep. Okay, cool. So, thank you everybody for joining this live stream. That will be the second part of the code review of Android Dev Summit application. So last time I did it on my own, and you actually, some of you who were looking in the comments, say that it will be great to have Gabor reviewing the code together with me. And I thought that is actually a great idea because Gabor is a very experienced developer. He knows a lot, and so happened that he's also Kotlin expert. So there will be no more fuck ups where I just can't say what some Kotlin magic does because Gabor actually knows all about that. So maybe Gabor, now I'm showing you, so you have your chance to introduce yourself maybe in case someone doesn't know you.
Hey everyone, I am Gabor Varadi. If you have seen my Twitter bio, I'm just a guy from Hungary, but also an Android developer. Technically, I graduated university in computer engineering in 2014. I have been a developer since then. I was not exclusively doing Android. I actually started with Spring backend development. But once I started working on Android in 2015, that greatly influenced the way I wrote code at the time, which is exactly why we were like, hey, using component and autowired was great. We should use something on Android that does the exact same thing, which is why I was actually fairly well versed in Dagger and Dagger 2 at the time. We also used Realm at the time. And we had multiple projects. The first one was mostly based on Google's recommendations at the time, not really using fragments, mostly just activities, many activities. I would not do that anymore. If you also follow me on Twitter, you probably know that I have been advocating for single activity applications instead because it's much easier to manage. But that's pretty much for this to know. Like, I have been a developer for 5 years. That's pretty much it.
So 5 years and single activity advocate.
Yes.
That's pretty much summarizes you.
Oh yeah, and Kotlin
So
for 3 years.
let's,
Yeah.
yeah, and you've been using Kotlin from the very beginning and you are Kotlin advocate. And you also wrote this very interesting Kotlin tutorial on GitHub
Yes, yes.
that I actually used to learn some Kotlin magic myself. So guys, if you want to get a little bit better at Kotlin, check out Gabor's stuff. By the way, last time when we did this code review, Gabor was the one who basically provided links and stuff in the comments. So now Gabor is on this side of code review. So if any of you like wants to help us, please jump ahead, go ahead and share links and share stuff to help other people to find the stuff that we're talking about. Yeah, Gabor, you don't need to do that
Oh,
anymore.
okay.
Hopefully someone else will do that. Okay, without further ado, let's jump basically back to the code base. And now it will take a little bit of time. You will see basically black screen for a little bit of time because for some reason that's the technical limitation that we faced, and hopefully in a minute it will get all right again, hopefully.
It worked last time.
Yeah, now it's online.
Okay.
Now you should see that. So the last time we did a code review, basically I did code review, I just touched on two components inside this application. The first one was launch activity, right? This one and all the associated classes like launch view model and some other use cases. And the second one was main activity, right? And the associated view model and use cases. So we've had very good discussion last time. But today we want to actually find the screens of this application because we haven't seen any complex UI in the last code review. So let's find the screens. And usually inside activity, you get the screens by calling setContentView, and here we use data binding. Gabor, have you had an experience with data binding so far?
Yes, the latest project I joined, it used data binding. It was not my choice. It was forked from an existing project. And eventually we could thankfully delete about 96% of it. Data binding stayed partly. For one, I never really liked the idea because you need to add this data tag. You need to specify the fully qualified name of whatever you want to use as a variable. And then you create these bindings, which is technically registering listeners from XML. And I'm like, hold on a second, do I want to write my code in XML?
Okay.
And then some people are
Okay,
like, hey, declarative binding is great.
Let's see if that's exactly if that's what's done here, because I'm not really sure about that. And now I see that probably each time I will be switching between the scenes, you will see a little bit of black screen, but then it becomes all right. So help me with this one. We're going set content view, and we are using this activity main XML. And of course, I don't care about anything except for its code. By the way, this latest change in Android Studio, when they moved these buttons up, so annoying.
It's absolutely annoying.
Okay.
I think that it was because they had multi-preview originally, but they removed it when they went stable, and now you cannot set the split view to be default. They said that it's gonna be possible to make it default in 4.0. I think it was better when that was the default in 3.5, so I'm not sure if that's an improvement in general that they have to fix it. But yeah.
Well, if there are Google developers watching this live stream, take note, guys. And please make the text default globally. Like I really haven't worked with one single developer who prefers to use UI editing or whatever it's called. I don't even know how it's called. Design tab.
Yeah.
So I think making text the default is a very reasonable approach. All right, let's see what we've got here. So the root element is constraint layout. Well, the root is layout because that's what data binding needs.
But they have
and
no
then we
data.
have constraint layout. Yeah, they have no data here though. So basically they will be using this data binding just as view binding, right?
Yep.
There's this new technique, view binding, and view binding can do the same thing. Basically it gives you all these elements within your layout without adding this layout tag. If I'm not mistaken, haven't worked with it yet.
Yep, that's what it does. And thankfully that results in no annotation processors, which is great if you're using capped. Well, if you don't want to use capped.
Great. So we've got constraint layout here, and inside we have bottom navigation view. And by the way, last time that what I said is that I'm not sure why people use very complex libraries for that. I implemented bottom navigation twice, at least, maybe even more, and each time it was just simple view where I put like several buttons, and it had some very basic state like the highlighted, the currently selected button, and that's all. And it worked all right, and it's not difficult to make it restore its state after process that. So Gabor, do you know any benefits to using this bottom navigation view?
Well, this
What
is
does
a
it give me?
Google sample, so it makes sense that they are promoting their own material components. Otherwise, I would have to delve into the code myself, as I don't use the material one myself either. Especially because back in the day, 3 years ago, when we actually did use this, they had this thing called a shifting mode, which was turned on by default. There was a method that allowed you to disable it, but it was set to private. So you had to use reflection to undo it. You may as well just use a frame layout and linear layout and just put 5 buttons next to each other, depending on your design, using image views and text, and then you don't need to muck around with menu resources then either. So
yeah. Okay, cool. And then we have fading snackbar, which is something very special to this one. Well, fading snackbar is self-explanatory. And then we have fragment container view. And that's actually what we want to trace, right? Because whatever the screen, well, the notion of the screen within this application will be, that will be just a fragment that we put inside this fragment container view. And what I want to do now, but why do I want to trace that? Because if I go to main activity, I don't see any fragment transaction here, right? So if I would not use navigation architecture component, I would basically put here somewhere inside onCreate some code that says if saved instance state is null, which means that we are not launching from saved states, we are launching for the first time, then perform some kind of navigation to your initial screen. But that's not what happens here. So therefore, I suspect that this fragment container view, this nav host fragment, will be used from within navigation component. And I suspect that this setup bottom navigation bar does a little bit more than it advertises. What do you think, Gabor?
We should check what it does, although, yeah, we should check it. It probably
Okay,
does.
so setup bottom navigation bar
Yes.
called on first creation and when restoring state. And by the way, last time I was kind of puzzled, if you remember that, I was puzzled that they're calling this setup bottom navigation bar here inside onCreate if it's the first launch of this application, but if they are restoring from the saved state upon configuration change or maybe process dev, they are calling to this same exact method from onRestore instance state. Do you happen to know why would anyone want to do that?
Not really, no. I wouldn't do that. Like typically in our case, using onCreate and the save instance state you get there to decide whether your after configuration changes or process that or on very first initialization is sufficiently enough. But I do wonder though, because it definitely has to do with the restoration order of something, but I'm not sure what they did.
Yeah, yeah. This sounds like a problem. Like there is some kind of coupling between the restoration of fragments and the restoration of the enclosing activity. So there's some kind of temporal coupling there, and to address this temporal coupling, they had to employ this basically hack. So let's get back here. So we have nav graph and we have schedule, info, and agenda. And then we have set up the bottom navigation view with a list of navigation graphs. Aha, so that's what this bottom navigation does. It integrates with this approach of nav component. So we set up with nav controller, and then yeah, well, add on destination change listener. So when destination
Is visible as
um,
visible.
okay, I don't understand what it does.
It just sets
Okay,
it to
current
visible
nav control.
always.
Yeah. How do I find the root screen
You
of
should
this
check the
application?
navigation XML.
Navigation XML. So probably it will be somewhere here, right? No.
But this is
Nav
definitely one of
schedule.
them. Maybe they have three separate graphs, one for each bottom navigation tab.
You you mean that this nav schedule XML is just for one single screen? That's
Not
the amount of XML that we need to
screen,
write for
it's
one single screen?
no, it's not one screen, it's one tab. So
Yeah, basically tab is the screen in bottom tab navigation. I see.
yes,
Okay,
but
cool.
also no.
So we have basically
This is two screens.
Jetpack Compose on the horizon, and Jetpack Compose is advertised to kill XML because everybody hates XML. And on the other hand, we have basically a lot of logic encoded inside this XML, right? or I misunderstand what I see here?
Well, the real question, yeah, there are three tabs. So apparently, in this case, they have three separate navigation XMLs for the three different tabs. And I guess that would mean that if you actually run IO Scheduler, or what is this again, Android Developer Summit application, then they might have a multi-stack approach done in this, in which case I understand why they have three tabs, in which case it also makes sense that they have the bottom navigation always visible. Apparently, that's what they want to do. So for each tab, they most likely have three different navigation host fragments. I don't think so, but they do set three different navigation graphs. And the navigation graph describes the kind of fragments that you can open and the actions that can make you move from one fragment to another fragment. Technically, not just from fragment, but from destination to destination. And by using this fragment tag, they define fragment destinations between you can switch. And if we check the code that is invoked from setup bottom navigation view, then we should see if that really does switch between these graphs that they provide as nav graph IDs back in main activity.
Okay, let's see. So we
Set
have
up with
set
nav
up with nav
controller.
controller.
That's the one we're curious about. It comes from navigation UI, but I do not remember it off the top of my head.
Okay, but I found this start destination schedule fragment.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
And from let's just start with this fragment and then roll and see how it goes. But basically, what you said now is that they just need several bottom tabs, right? And for each tab, you want to have a standalone backstack.
Yes, that's what's happening here.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So, like a month ago, I wrote this post about this very simple library called FragNav, and this library allows you to achieve the same thing in like, I don't know, fifth, tenth of the code that I see here, maybe even less. But let's go to schedule fragment. So we have fragment, its ID is schedule fragment, and it's mapped to schedule fragment. Great. So that's probably the first screen of this application. It's main screen, right? Let's see what we have here. It's Dagger fragment. Well, okay. It's main navigation fragment, whatever it means. And we have analytics helper view model factory surely injected. And then we have schedule view model, and we have coordinator layout here. So maybe some kind of collapsing app bar, some kind of motion effect. Snackbar message manager, floating action button, filters. View pager, bottom sheet behavior. We have bottom sheet. That's probably why we need this coordinator layout. We want to drag something from the bottom of the screen up. And we have snack bar, fading snack bar. Okay, and we have sign in dialog dispatcher and notifications dialog dispatcher, and that's the pattern that I also saw in the previous code review. So what they do is, since you're using view model like Google's MVVM, you can't really show dialogues from within view model itself, because showing a dialog requires context, and view model should not have references to context, even transitive. So you need to do this sign in dialog dispatchers, and that's basically just creating a dialog. Instead of having one global dialogs manager, and you will just call a method and tell it like show sign in dialog. Very simple. Okay, let's see what we do here. In onCreate, we require activity, and we add callback to onBackPress dispatcher. Okay, so what we want to do here is basically intercept onBackPressed calls. And whenever the back button, hardware back button is pressed, we want to call this onBackPressed. And then we say the following. If the bottom button is initialized and it is expanded, we want to hide it, collapse or hide. Okay, that's cool, but why don't we return anything from this function?
Well, that's a good question. Hmm.
I mean, I would imagine that if you have this thing expanded and you press on hardware back button, then it will basically it will hide this bottom bar, and then there will be no other side effects, right? So basically the same pattern that I will do with navigation drawer. But here what I see is that they always return false, right? That's what I see here.
It's interesting.
So basically they kind of say that this thing never intercepts, right? Never intercepts these never intercepts back clicks. So even when it's open, the standard back behavior will still be invoked.
This, but I'm
Am I
checking it.
reading that correct?
I have not
You're
used the on-backpress dispatcher because generally,
you're
if you are aware of the tag of the current active fragment, then you can talk to that directly, and then you don't need to use the on-backpress dispatcher. So I haven't worked this with yet, but if I check the documentation, it says that on-backpress is void. So I do wonder how you tell it that you should no longer use this. Apparently, the trick seems to be that it has a separate set enabled call of some sort, and the and this thing intercepts as long as it has enabled callbacks. That's strange, but okay.
Yeah. Well, anyways, I do use this pattern, but I never use this specific implementation because I always kind of create uh, my own abstraction around that. So basically, I would have something like back pressed manager, let's say, and each fragment registers to that manager whenever it sees fit.
Okay, so
So
I
it's
figured this out.
absolutely the same thing.
I figured this out. Apparently, on-back pressed callback, when you give it false, that's actually is enabled false. So that means that this thing only intercepts back if somewhere in this code they call on-back press callback dot set enabled true. I think if they have code, yep, there it is.
No,
That's it. That's the one.
when you state, aha, I see what they say. So, and when this on back press callback is enabled, basically it consumes this event and no other registered callback will be notified.
Yep.
So just one of them.
Yep.
Okay, great. This makes sense. Well, I mean, from API standpoint, it's a little bit confusing and like, in my estimation, a little bit too complex for the job, but that's probably okay. All right, let's get back up to understand what's going on here. So we register that in onCreate. Then in onCreate view, we initialize view model. And then we do, that's basically data binding, right?
Yep.
And for some reason, we pass in lifecycle view owner.
That's no surprise if they use live data inside the view model and then create bindings to those live data.
Ah, so you can create bindings from data binding directly to view model.
Yes.
That's cool. That's cool.
But at what
Okay.
cost?
Okay, let's see. Inflator container false. Where do we get this from? Fragment schedule. So here, yeah, we have this view model, and then cannot find declaration to go to.
Control P on
But
the
we do
type.
have that. Yeah, it doesn't work for me. I mean, I need to make text cell search. No problem. No
Okay.
problem. So we do include schedule app bar and we pass view model into it as well. And here, for example, we do custom swipe refresh layout. And on refresh listener, we, oh God. So they directly call view model methods from within XML.
Yes.
Okay, cool. And then refreshing.
That should be a live data boolean, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so yeah, you're absolutely correct. Here we have live data boolean. So basically, whenever they will call on swipe refresh, they will set this value to some value, and then it will be reflected in the UI. This swipe refresh layout, that's basically small circle turning around at the top of the screen, and they maybe change the colors a little bit. Okay, cool. So this schedule fragment has some kind of a recycler view, and this recycler view implements swipe to refresh, which is very common pattern really on Android. Okay, then we have coordinator layout. We've seen all of that, and then we have Snackbar preference view model.
What? Okay.
Why? I mean, I remember that we had some kind of a view, had schedule view model, right? And in addition to schedule view model, we also have Snackbar preference view model.
Mysterious. We should check what it does.
Yeah. And this view model has function on stop click, and whenever stop is clicked, they launch a new coroutine, and they call to stop Snackbar action use case. By the way, what do you think about this pattern of like invoking use cases or invoking some behavior just by writing this kind of stuff?
Well, it's an interesting concept. Like, if we press Ctrl B on this, then if we check that it's a suspending operator fun invoke, then I don't really like that, to be honest. I prefer to make. Well, apparently, at least. No, I think it's inherited.
Yes,
suspend operator fun invoke. I'm not really a fan of this, to be honest. Like, it can make sense to some degree, but I prefer to have a separate execute method because it's much clearer. The intent is clearer anyway.
Yeah, and it's much easier to trace the code because now when I control click on that, it just can't. And if there would be a method call here, I would actually be able to go and see the method call without going and investigating 3 levels of hierarchies, tracing and constructing. Okay, so I would say don't use that. It's really hard to understand and breaks basically your ability to navigate to this thing.
Personally, I say that if you do use this, then your variable shouldn't have the use case at the end. Like then it really does look like a method called like stop snackbar action, and that would make sense. But yeah, but whether you should really do that or not, I'm conflicted about it. I think it's a trap.
Yeah, and again, that this use case is just basically sets something inside this preference storage that's basically writing
the shared preferences.
Shared preference. So basically, this Snackbar shared preference view model delegates launches a coroutine and delegates to use case that simply writes to shared preference, and like God.
I don't think this is necessary from them, mostly because like if you call editor.apply, that already runs on a background thread, so you don't need to use coroutines to do that. I'm not sure why they did this.
Yeah, but I'm not sure either, but I know that there is this problem with shared preferences that sometimes when you work with them, especially when the application just starts, it can cause your application to hang because something in file system it can't grab, file handle can't open the file that it needs to read from initially. It happens very rare, but on applications that have like millions of users, they do see these errors. Basically, you get application not responding error from accessing shared preferences. But again, it's something like most people don't even pay attention to that. Like you say, 0 point, like some small percentage of my errors will come from that. And actually, couple of months ago, I've seen that they are working on asynchronous version for shared preferences. So probably they want to address this problem in the future. But again, like you got this Snackbar preference view model, and then you have this stop Snackbar action use case, and all of that is to just flip one value inside your shared preference. Basically, you could just take this and put it straight like where you call this view model. Folks, don't do that. That's, well, first of all, this doesn't function as a view model at all, because this class already has a view model, like schedule view model. So it's not really clear what this additional view model does. And anyways, like in my estimation, view model is not very good abstraction for anything, but surely not for this kind of stuff. That was just
No, I
maybe
believe
one single
what
use
they
case.
should have done, if they really want to do all these abstractions, like what I typically see is, instead of like snack preference view model, which is not a view model at all, it could be like snack bar preference manager if they really want one, and make that a singleton. It doesn't have to be scoped to the screen. Like if I press this and then I back out of the app for some reason, am I supposed to lose this coroutine? Should it be cancelled? And you're like, well, not really, to be honest. So if they had just run it in a singleton
Oh,
scope,
yes.
like global scope launch at
Yes, of
worst.
course. I haven't even thought about that. Like this view model scope, it's scoped to view model. So if they really go back from this screen or close the app or whatever, because this method is called from other screens as well. So for example, you could go to session detail fragment, and they would invoke this on stop click there for some reason, and then you go back to the previous screen and this coroutine will be stopped, right?
Yep. So what you want to
And
save
then,
might not even get saved.
yeah, and why would you like to abort
Saving to share pref, I
like
have
a
no idea.
write to shared preference? Okay, so that's probably not very good use of view models and use cases and coroutines altogether.
Really, they should just
Okay,
use a
let's see what
singleton.
else. Yeah, maybe. I don't like singletons myself, but maybe to have a use case that simply just writes there. I mean, it will be 5 lines of code,
Yeah, that works.
or just inject this stuff. What's it
Chrome
called?
Dagger.
No, I mean this preference storage. Just inject it directly into this schedule fragment and use it here. Also cool for me. Okay, and then we set up some snack bar. What does it mean? An extension for fragment that sets up a snack bar with snack back message manager. Okay.
See, they have managers. They know what we're talking about.
Yes, but you use message managers only if you have extension function. That's a rule.
No.
Snackbar message observe this event observer. Snackbar message fading show. The hell is going on here?
Observe this, but that's a surprise. Where are they calling this? Is it this in onCreate view? Yes?
Yeah.
Yay, we found a bug. First one today. They should be
Okay.
using
Then
view lifecycle owner instead of this, because this way, if you just navigate forward and navigate back, then they will have two registrations instead of one, because they scope the live data to the fragment itself instead of its view.
I'm lost.
Setup snack
This
bar.
like
Yeah, observe this should
snack
be.
bar message.
It should be view lifecycle owner. To be honest, all of these should be view lifecycle owner. What?
Wait a second, but well, to be honest, I'm really I have difficulty even visualizing what's going on here. So they basically want to show, at some point they want to show snack bar.
Yep.
Yep, snack bar for some reason.
Mhm.
So when I need to do that, I have some kind of snack bar controller, snack bar navigator, whatever you want to call that, and then I just call a method show snack bar of type X. Show, I don't know, what will be that be? Something, and that's all. Why? Okay, can you tell me, like, it looks like you know what's going on? Why do they need all this magic? Why do they need live data?
Well, technically, what's going on, I think we should check what Snackbar Message Manager means. But if if I'm not mistaken, what's going on is that they want to send an event from the view model to the fragment to tell it to show a snack bar, but only once.
Yeah.
And if you're rotating while you're getting that message, then it should show that snack bar on the first subscription. So it's the exact same thing as what they did with dialogues and what they do with navigation in general. It's the same thing.
All right. I will pretend that I understood. I will pretend. I will make a smart face, straight face, and I will say, yeah,
I mean,
sounds
that could
reasonable.
possibly mean that I didn't explain it well. The thing that
No, I
you did?
actually, I was joking. I actually understood
Okay.
what you meant. Is that just like I'm comparing it with just standard approach? When
Oh,
something happens, you just tell it like show snack bar X, and then if it so happens that this snack bar is already shown, then nothing will happen.
yep.
So it's like kind of there's this concept called okay, well, that's actually a very nice interject. There is this concept called idempotency, not impotency, but okay, I will just write it to the chat. Idempotence. Well, I hope I got it right. So there's this concept called idempotence, and it's a very important concept when you design your software, guys, because what it means is that if a method or an operation is idempotent, it means that you can call it multiple times and you will produce basically exactly the same effect as calling it once. So for example, if you think about REST API, get methods, they're idempotent. If you call get multiple times, you will always get the same response. It will be just the same as calling the get once, if in the meanwhile there was no change of state, of course. And the same applies to your software. So whenever you show a snack bar and you want to make sure that you will not, or a dialog, for example, and you want to make sure that you will not show it multiple times, you have two choices. Choice number one, right before you do that operation, you check whether what's the state. Like, I mean, you can save some kind of a state. Snack bar of type X is shown right now, and then right before you show the snack bar, you do here, for example, inside the fragment, or I will do that inside controller, really, inside controller, which is view model in this case. Um, I will do like if I'm showing snack bar, if my current state is showing a snack bar, because I know what's my state, right? Then I just don't show it again. And the other way to go about that would be to make this method inside my, let's call it snack bar manager. To make the method show snack bar, show, I don't know, snack bar of type X, I will make it idempotent. So whatever magic and hackery I need to do inside this manager, the outside clients wouldn't need to know about that. So I will just call show dialog X and then show dialogs X, show snack bar X, show snack bar X, show snack bar X, and these three calls would result in just one single snack bar being showed. And that's the concept of idempotence. So you can call a method multiple times without producing multiple side effects. With producing side effects that would amount to just one single invocation. That's very powerful and useful concept in software. So that you, what you described, Gabor, they will be able to achieve that by making a methods inside this snack bar manager idempotent, right? For example, or by just checking, like, when you are showing Snackbar, it's not a big deal. And when Snackbar is dismissed, you can change the state, so it's not really not a problem. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure why it needs to be that complicated. Basically, having this extension method and then observing this method, this message. So they send a message, which is live data really. So basically, whenever right, so whenever we want, whenever we want to show a snack bar, this schedule view model will write some value into this private inner property snack bar message. Yep, here. If result is error, then we set snack bar message to something. And really, again, that's kind of a limitation of view model itself. Like, if that would be a normal controller without lifecycle hackery, then you will just call here snack bar message, snack bar manager show snack bar with these attributes, and that will be probably all. But now you need to pass this through view model, and then this view model you break encapsulation. So not only you pass view model to schedule fragment, which is kind of all right if you follow model view model, but now you also have this extension function, right? So and then you observe. I mean, now it's getting scattered over a larger area of your code base, and for me it's very difficult to understand what's going on here, even though Gabor, you explained it very well. So I would say that it's like not very good approach, and that's action click listener. So here, whenever we click on some at all, right?
Apparently.
That says no. Inside this manager, should snack bar be ignored? Add message. Yeah. So if you click on snack bar once, basically what this application does, they will not show you snack bars anymore, and that's the use case. Basically, disabling snack bars long term. That's what they need. Why they need this snack bar view model, and call this launch this coroutine that updates value inside preferences. So great, we found the use case for why they use that. Then we have schedule view model, navigate to session action. Okay, so whenever this navigate to session action is being written, and it is written on open event detail, do you want to find the usage of base? No. Then yes. Okay, cool. So basically, from data binding code from XML, right? Let's find this place actually.
It says something about item session XML, and I think we are looking at it.
Yeah. So from here, from within constraint layout, when you click on it, it will call to open event detail. It will directly call a method on the view model, telling it what to do. And like in the last code review, we discussed that views that tell controllers what to do is not really a good separation of concerns and responsibilities, but like XML, which tells controllers what to do, is like, oh shit. Whew. But anyway, this XML tells basically view model, which is supposed to contain kind of a business logic, application logic. So this XML tells it open event detail, and even passes parameter, which is from user session. And user session is being passed So basically, this entire XML like needs to know about user session because it invokes method on controllers, and when it invokes method, it needs to know. By the way, is it really? No, yeah. We are also using this user session to show some kind of information here. Okay, otherwise it will be absolutely crazy. But anyway, this method, there is an interface. Cool. Oh, event actions that can be performed on events. I don't know what it means. But we've been, we've been here
Overall,
inside.
it's slightly better than calling the view model directly, but I don't know who this belongs to.
This sits in session command, but what's interesting is that it's not specific to one single view model. You see two view models and one view model delegate default open event. Okay, interesting approach. Anyways, let's get. So hopefully, schedule view model will get this notification, and then it will write something into this stuff, and this stuff is subscribed to in fragment, and then fragment calls open session details. And by the way, why did we need to do that work roundabout trip? I mean, basically, if this XML, right? If this XML is already in control of the flow and view model doesn't do anything here, then instead of notifying view model, we could just notify the fragment, right? Because eventually all we want to do is call to this method, open session details. So there was absolutely no need to go through live data and view model. Just notify the fragment with a simple click listener, and that's all. Okay, and there are more of these. So you navigate to different screens. By the way, Gabor, you have more experience with Kotlin and architecture company than me. Are all methods when you use MVVM, are all of them get this long as this one? With all these?
Well, I would typically use an extension function to reduce the stuff that you don't like typing all the time, which in case of live data, I see people often use .observe this or view lifecycle owner, and then they specify observer. And they shouldn't need to do that. That's actually from a limitation of the single action method conversion, so the SAM conversion of Kotlin, because lifecycle owner can be an interface. So if one of them is an interface and the other one is not, then you had to specify it. I think they have fixed that since then. In this case, though, they specified specifically so that it doesn't use a regular observer. It uses an event observer, which was described in an article that was talking about how single live data is bad. You should use live data event wrapper for some reason.
An
And
observer, I'm reading from the documentation in the code. An observer for events simplifying the pattern of checking if the event's content has already been handled. It's only called if the event's content has not been handled. So it sounds like they're trying to do what you said, just a single handling of each type of event, right?
yes, technically they need this because live data retains the last emitted value. So when you re-observe it, like for example, you navigate forward, you navigate back, you use view lifecycle owner as you should, then on your first subscription, you get the previous limited value because it has a set value. But when you use live data for navigation, which is the same as using a behavior relay for navigation, which is rather odd, nobody ever did that before live data came out, you get this event stuck. Like you start getting it again and again. Hey, I wanted to go there. So you either clear it out manually, which nobody really ever needed to do, or you hack live data until it stops emitting the first time. So in this case, they opted for the second option. I personally prefer the idea that they didn't even want a behavior relay here at all, or a live data here at all. You want something that doesn't retain the value for resubscription unless it was not emitted. So personally, I have something else called an event emitter. I will link it because maybe that helps. So I use that instead of this live data event wrapper thing, mostly because in this case, like if you didn't use the event observer, you can use a regular observer, but if you do, then you will get bugs. So instead, they specify this event observer all the time. But uh, if I'm not mistaken, they could set up a function like observe event over lifecycle owner that would hide this event observer stuff from you. So they could just say show pref action.observe event and then just pass it the lambda. So you usually don't need this much.
Okay,
Honestly, if you see this much, then you want to reduce it.
and by the way,
Or you think you're based.
is when they use this event observer, does it make sense to use fragment as a lifecycle owner, or is it still a bug?
This is still a bug. This should be view lifecycle owner, all of them.
Okay, so that's still a bug, even though they use event observer. This doesn't change the
No,
relationship
this is
between.
actually lucky because it means that the fragment only handles it once, but it registers n times.
Okay. So guys, if you use MVVM, always Gabor says always use view lifecycle owner inside fragments. And by the way, people forget about that, but that wasn't by design. The fact that view lifecycle owner exists is a huge fuck up of. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't say that. Is a huge screw up of the developers who implemented live data. Oh, seriously now. Initially, live data came out and they advertised it as like the live data and view model, of course, as like all your lifecycle problems are gone now. Like from now on, you're in paradise of no lifecycle problems. And then very quickly, someone wrote a blog post. I forgot the name of this person. Maybe I will remember it later. So they wrote a blog post advertising that no, you have, except for all other problems of view model and live data, you also have this bug in fragments. And then they had to work around this bug and they introduced view lifecycle owner. So view lifecycle owner, the existence of view lifecycle owner is just a manifestation of the fact that whoever worked on live data and view model, they just didn't understand lifecycle in enough details to write a reliable framework. So now you see these bugs inside Google's code. So, and I wouldn't be surprised if part of the developers who actually wrote view model and live data worked on this code. So, like, you know, can you create a framework that you yourself cannot use properly? That's the answer. Okay, um, it's not a surprise, right, that I'm kind of against view model and live data. It's not new. And by the
I think
way,
the idea of live data was okay. It was okay. I mean, I have seen enough code where they really were looking for something like live data, but they were missing this concept of the event emitter, which I linked just a second ago, because in RxJava, you have the behavior relays and the publish relays. Published relays are also not the best for this problem because while they don't retain any history of emitted events, they don't enqueue them if there's no active observer. So they should have created something that was similar to live data in the sense that you can observe it, but it would only retain events if there is no active observer, and most importantly, it should have been able to retain multiple values that were not emitted yet. So they don't have that in architecture components, and we see the result of that here with the event observer stuff. I would not recommend using this approach personally.
okay, I would not use either of these approaches, but okay. Yeah, by the
It
way,
depends on whether you have a retained controller.
well, yeah. And by the way, there was a discussion on Twitter, and live data is just a retained controller. Live data view model is just a
View
retained
model.
controller. It's not more and
It's
not
not even a
less.
view model.
It's not a view model in any way. It's just a retained controller. But it has on cleared, so it's retained controller with one additional method that you will not be able probably to implement easily yourself. But that's all. And by the way, Mitch Tabian does a good job of helping people in the comment section. Mitch, thank you very much. Shout out to Mitch. Uh, if you don't know, Mitch has also great Android development courses, specifically on for beginner intermediate developers. So if that's what you look for, check out his site. Okay, right. So then we have schedule view model, current event observe. This doesn't tell me anything at all. Like we have something called current event. This sounds like a kitchen sink. Like everything will go here. So if user did not interact with schedule view model and event location is not null.
Oh, wow.
What's event location?
I hear this is something that the view model should be driving.
Okay. Switch to the current day. View pager, run, post.
Boss.
Okay, so they have view pager, and inside view pager they want to switch. They want to switch to the current day, whatever it means. So probably like I'm not sure. Let me just I have actually I have this application here. So let's do that. Get started. How are you attending the conference? Given that it happened like 6 months ago, I'll probably do it in person. I see. So they have two tabs for 2 days of the conference, and they want you to they probably want to schedule for a specific event when it happens. And now I'm very curious when exactly live view model sets this variable. Load session result, switch map. Only emit if the feature is not remotely disabled. If is-scroll feature enabled use case. God, this again, just yeah, app
You shouldn't
config.
have to put in a unit, to be honest. Like
Yeah,
the reason why they have that is because they have that base use case that you did mention that you shouldn't have that because it makes code navigation hard. It also makes your use cases more complex. Like you are bound to a one arithmetic parameter, even when you have multiple and even when you have none. So in this case, they have none. So what you see here is basically passing in a void to make it work. If they just don't use a base use case like this that predefines how many arguments you have, they would not need that unit. Also, I'm not a fan of multi-line it in Kotlin. Like, I still think it's one of the biggest mistakes they did that they didn't put it in the style guide specifically. They tweeted about it, but they don't have it in the style guide that you shouldn't use it in multi-line lambdas because then you end up with this.
well, that's actually not the worst example, right? There are like
No, there are
much,
worse. Yeah,
much
but
worse.
it's a general rule. In our case, I just comment in code review, say, use the real name for this.
Okay, so let's see. Let's see the implementation. Ah, God. Um, map. Oh, that's actually a little bit worse example. refresh user sessions. First of all, let's see where we call that. Well, we call that in multiple places. We call that initially when we just launch, when we just construct this view model, we initially call refresh user sessions, right? Sorry, what's going on here?
Supervisor scope, that's new.
Supervisor scope, this just means that if one of the child coroutines fails, it will not cause all other children to fail. So they basically want to execute these two methods, and if one of them fails, the other coroutine should not be cancelled. Okay, that's a use case, and that's just a function. Load events. Yeah, I'm not even sure why would that fail. Like, it's not clear. Parameters load from preference storage. What's parameters? User session matcher. Okay, here. No, they don't throw anything from here, so I'm not sure actually why they decided to use supervisor scope. Nothing here is being thrown. So, by the way, they say that if this use case fails, we don't want to cancel the execution of this coroutine. And by the way, they don't, if I'm not mistaken, again, Kotlin is not my strongest suit, but I do know a bit about coroutines. And if I'm not mistaken, they don't need supervisor scope here. They could just use standard scope. Because structured concurrency, like this cancellation stuff, if I'm not mistaken, it's not propagated down to scope. So if you use a scope and within scope something fails, the parent of this scope will not be cancelled. But that's just from the top of my head. It's worth checking out.
Also, view model scope uses what's it called again? Supervisor job internally, so that shouldn't really cancel it either.
Yeah, you could probably replace this supervisor scope with just with context.
No, I mean view model scope already is using a supervisor job. That's what I mean. But maybe we're using non-cancelable here, so.
You think view model scope uses supervisor job? You think?
Yes, it does. I checked the code.
Yeah, the code.
But at least the last time I checked, it did.
Yep. Closable coroutine scope. Supervisor's job on main dispatcher. Yeah. Well, I'm not sure why they need then supervisor scope here at all. Any kind of scope here, because even if they just try to put that and it fails, since everything here is supervisor, it shouldn't cause all other tasks to fail.
I think that should just be launched.
This?
Oh well.
No, I think they just need to do it like this. That's all.
Okay.
So we're already here inside launch. That's a coroutine. So we want
but
to
they
just
are also launching other coroutines inside that launch, so
creating a new coroutine to listen for user auth changes, because we don't want to suspend the calling coroutine on the collect call, and we also want to listen for changes in conference data. You know what? Maybe I was mistaken. Maybe I'm not sure. Maybe this is kind of some long-running process. No, but it's like.
And this is why I don't like Flow yet.
Okay, so they probably want to do these things in parallel. They just parallel execution, while I'm not sure, but if you want to parallelize stuff in coroutines, shouldn't you use async launcher and not launch? I hear you googling, Gabor.
I am actually responding on chat.
Ah, okay. So we have current Firebase user, and then we want to refresh user session. Basically, we want to call this method. Let's get back to this refresh user session. That's very important method probably. We want to call it every time there is some change in the system, whether it's Firebase, whether it's something that user initiated, whether it's anything. And then whenever we call to this refresh user session, we have this load user session job cancel is active. Yep. Well, basically what we do here, we've had this job, which probably, let's see where we got, where it's initialized here. Okay. So if we have one, we will cancel it. Sorry. How comes we don't get null pointer exception here?
Cancel effective is probably an extension function over
Yeah.
nullable job. Yeah.
Right.
Which is kind of strange, to be honest. I don't think it should be. But, oh well.
I mean, I usually do, first time I see that, I usually do.
Yes. Yep.
Yep, job. I think my Android Studio lags a bit. I usually do that. So, what do you think?
I would do the second one as well.
I mean,
So I'm not
instead,
sure what they're checking with the activeness. Like this project that I was lately working on at work, it uses RX Java, so I'm not that well versed in coroutines, to be honest. So the minor difference between this active check versus just canceling, I'm not sure what the difference is. With RX, this would just be null safe operator call dispose, and that's it. So as such, the cancel call is what makes sense to me as well.
Yeah, but this, yeah, well, I would maybe kind of advocate for them and say that maybe they thought that cancel if active is kind of more descriptive than using this pattern of like and then cancel. But I would say that that's one of the few instances where I would prefer shorter code because it's actually very understandable what you do with this question mark. Anyways, how do we get this job? We launch a new coroutine here, and then we invoke this load user session, and then we initialize some kind of parameters. Okay, we invoke this use case with some kind of parameters, and then we do collect. That's flow, right?
Yep.
So do you happen to know what collect means?
It's like subscribe or observe. Observe, I mean. Like you subscribe for an observable in RX, you collect a flow. It's analogous in that regard.
Cool. So whenever this use case completes, we go and we initialize a session result, and then we want to group sessions by day. Session time for each. Okay, that's again some kind of use case invocation, and after we invoke it, gosh, you know what I miss here? What I really miss here in all these places? I don't see any kind of I see. So because they have this base class for their use cases, which handles concurrency for them, which offloads computations to background threads using all this magic, then basically each time they need to go to a background thread, they invoke a use case. So use case in this case is not kind of domain abstraction, which I would argue you need to do. You need to kind of, okay, like load user sessions use case is kind of okay. This is the main concept you want to use, but in other places they use use cases just to offload it to a background thread. And that's not very good, because if you want to offload stuff to background thread, then you should probably do that as part of existing functionality. Or maybe if it's something special, then you treat it special exceptionally, but you don't kind of distort your main domain abstractions just to make it easier to offload stuff to background thread, especially when you use coroutines and it's really easy there, simple. Okay, so to group session by name, we get this them, and then for each index we call something really long, which I don't understand what's that. And then we invoke again some kind of a use case, which does
For a given index.
which goes to repository and retrieves conference days. Okay. So again, this use case is used, I don't know why. And then
Wait a second, did it say time utils.conference days? Is that some sort of static global thing? What is it?
yeah, I mean
What
we
is it?
used
Let's see. Ah, okay.
you're looking at it,
Yep.
and you have all these functions here, and there probably should also be some kind of what's interesting here really is that
They don't need coroutines for this.
yeah, it's totally a static class. It's just like
Yep.
a static utils class that I would have in Java, and I would come and to developer and say like, let's see, we can refactor that to something better, but we see that in Kotlin, and in Kotlin you shouldn't do that probably, right? I mean, the worst case scenario.
It makes sense that they have an object like this, but it shouldn't be called utils because half of it is utils, but the conference stuff, that's configuration.
I
So
see.
I don't think it's really time utils. It's not really utils because this is what configures the available dates on which this schedule should exist. So this belongs to the schedule. So I would think it's either event manager or schedule manager or something like that would make a better place than time utils.
Yeah. So
But I still
basically,
don't
what you
understand
say is
why they
that
use a coroutine for loading this.
yeah, but what you say is basically that you have like utils classes which are for non-domain concepts, some kind of general stuff, working with times, working with strings, working with whatever, but something which is not related to your business domain. And then you have this very core stuff that is like what was it, conference days, right? Conference days.
Yep.
And conference days is actually part of your business domain. Like it's the days when the conference takes place. So you don't want to mix that with some general high-level utils static methods.
Yeah. And also in Kotlin, well, this might be a question of preference, but usually, as far as I know, you don't really need util classes for utility methods because you can create utility functions, and whatever it operates on, it can be made into an extension function. So usually, instead of something like object time utils, you would have an extension function at top level.
Okay. And after we got uh, that, we set a value on this session time data day. Um, okay, basically we push whatever we constructed here. What I get, what's my problem here is that this really, uh, this really is a standalone use case, one single use case. But instead of extracting one single abstraction, I'm not sure what it does, but let's say it load user, fetch user sessions. That this thing loads and fetches user sessions, does some kind of processing, orders them, groups them, whatever it is. But it's a one single flow that you execute. And so instead of breaking it into like 2 or 3 use cases, and then adding this utils class, and then having all this logic inside schedule view model, and I kind of expect that they should probably duplicate part of that logic somewhere. Instead of that, you could just extract one single use case, call it load user sessions, and then internally load user sessions use case, and then encapsulate all this ugliness inside this one single use case. And then when I review your code, I wouldn't need to go line by line, trying to understand at least what every single line does. I will just see an invocation of one single use case, and that will be enough for me. So I think this block of code, that's really missed opportunity for encapsulation of one single domain flow inside one single use case instead of writing it all here, because it doesn't belong to view model. That's just one single flow.
Yep.
All right, let's see. Maybe let's get back to fragment. Where is our fragment? Schedule fragment. So that's where we started. I wanted to see what's current event, where this current emit first and finish session. Okay. So they're probably just looking at some kind of a system time, and then they're asking like, is there an event going on right now, like session, like a talk at a conference going on right now? And if current event changes, then we want to do what? We want to switch to that day. Okay, relatively simple functionality written in relatively complex way in my estimation. Okay, on view created. That's very interesting. Gabor, I actually am very glad to have this opportunity to discuss that with you. I never used on view created, maybe like once or twice, when I had to implement some kind of a base functionality in a base class for my fragments. Then I resolved to this on view created, because you cannot implement base method for on create view. You don't call super here, but in on view created you usually call super because it's void. But they don't, by the way. No, really, they don't call. Yeah,
I'm surprised they're not calling super.onViewCreated.
that's really strange.
I need to check fragment code for this.
Yeah, probably you should.
Typically do.
Probably you should call, like on view created is one of these methods that you should probably call, because especially currently, like you have on view created and it goes directly to parent. But if for some reason in the future you would like to introduce some kind of common behavior to all your fragments inside on view created of the parent class, well, in this case it's a Dagger fragment, there is not even parent class, then the fact that you don't call on view created could lead to very like nasty bugs. You will just need to go and investigate why it doesn't work and then find. So always delegate lifecycle methods to their, always call super on lifecycle methods if they are void. So what's your opinion on view created? Do you use it?
Yes, technically yes. Originally I didn't know about it, so I used to put everything in on create view, but technically I think it's cleaner that in one place you create the view and in the other place you receive it as a non-null like argument, and then just can do whatever with it. It exists, it works. It's mostly a matter of style at this point, except if you use Kotlin-X synthetics, in which case the view must be set on the fragment for it to work. So in that case, synthetics would not work in onCreateView. You do need to use onView created for those.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, I think Kotlin synthetics, they're kind of deprecated. They're not officially deprecated, but there was this blog post or someone from Google, I remotely remember, that they say that you should not use them because there's some problem, like memory leak or some problem with lifecycle with synthetics. Do you remember the details of that?
They posted it on Reddit that if that they realized that synthetics don't play that well with both multi-module stuff, and more importantly, you can get null pointer exceptions if you invoke something on a view that's not actually in your layout. You can import synthetic accessors even from views that don't exist in your view. And that's one thing. I personally like how view binding came to be and is finally available, and we will migrate to it because if you have extension functions over view, then if you are in that scope, then invoking a synthetic would try to look up inside that view on which you call the extension function and not the fragments layout. So you end up with, hey, why is this view null here? And I'm like, oh, it's because you're in an extension function. You should get a wall to it above it, which is like totally not obvious. And then my coworker, oh yeah, I guess that makes sense. Silly me. No, that's a mistake of synthetics. I prefer how you have binding, and they always work, whether you're in an extension function or not.
Yeah, view binding actually looks cool. And by the way, I achieved my objective. My objective was to say something good about because last time people complained that I only hate everything. So here's something good. View binding looks good. Okay, here I am on record saying something good about one of the latest trends. And the reason it looks good is probably because Jake Wharton was involved. So
Yeah.
um,
Jake Wharton recommends it. He even said that butter knife is no longer supported except for maybe major bug fixes, if there
yeah,
are any, which probably not, because view binding is just better and no annotation processing involved, which is great.
yeah.
Yeah. I didn't actually get into that data binding. There's this one thing about data binding that if you modify like an ID in a layout, then it makes annotation processors run. If you have any non-incremental annotation processors, then all of them become non-incremental. And if that happens, then you have an 8-minute build for working with layout XMLs, and that's so bad.
Yeah, but if I'm not mistaken, like one of my clients, they have butter knife in their code base, and I checked for them. I saw that butter knife got incremental annotation processing support in one of the
Yes, they do.
so, sometimes. So you can probably make all your annotation processors today incremental, except for if you use something really exotic, like
Like
epoxy.
Android annotations. Epoxy or Android annotations, yeah.
People still use Android annotations. I mean, that was like, phew. It reminds me like I
No
forgot
comment.
about that. When you said annotations, I even didn't think about the framework. I like, what's that? And
When I'm like Android annotations, that's the framework, yeah.
yeah, well,
It's best to know about it. Kept doesn't like it.
yeah, for those of you who might not have been in Android development like 50 years ago, where people actually used Android annotation, don't use it. Like there's really no reason to use that. And in my estimation, there hasn't been any reason to use that ever. As well as butter knife, by the way. So there are a lot of
Mm.
things I disagree with Jake about, but specifically view binding looks good, and I will actually try it sometime very soon. Well, basically once I'm convinced that it's relatively stable and bugs will be like first bugs will be fleshed out. All right, let's just try. By the way, you say that it makes sense to separate on create view and on view created. And when you say that, I looked up, and in this case, it actually makes sense because on create view is so huge. in my fragments, like even if I'm not using standalone controller, on create view is usually like 5 lines of code, 4 lines of code. So I don't have anything to put in on view created, but in this case you've got like, I don't know, like 40 lines of code here and God knows how many lines of code here. Let's see what they
This
do
is
in.
just plumbing for navigation events from the view model to here.
Yeah, maybe. Let's see. Um, okay, they set up view pager. Yeah, that's just a lot of view pager stuff. Bottom sheet behavior. Um, expand it. And whenever bottom sheet state changes, let's see this bottom sheet. Actually, I want to see that somewhere here, right? Yep. Why don't I see that? That's so they're probably using this as a bottom sheet, right? And this one collapses and expands.
You
So
need
there's
to click the fab, the
that's the
filter
bottom sheet.
fab.
Yeah, thank you. That's the bottom sheet. Okay, cool. Well, I must say that this application looks great on UI. I mean, I like its UI. It's simple, it's functional, and well, yeah. And this thing here, you see these times on the upper left. When you scroll up, they kind of remain in one place. That's
Whoa.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, if a client would come to me and tell me like we want to implement this feature, I would tell them like you please don't. Like you will spend several days on that. Your developer will spend several days on that. There's no way anyone would like. There's no way you get any benefit from that that will justify the investment. But visually it looks good. All right. So when the bottom state changes, okay, we set some flags on the view, import for accessibility, basically accessibility stuff. I think Gabor, you are very good with accessibility, right? If I remember correctly,
Not
you
really, no,
no.
unfortunately. No, that's why I'm always excited about these talks I post where Google finally creates a talk about accessibility. Like you have
Mm.
Jetpack for all these things, there's nothing for accessibility, which is a shame because if there's one sample where it's like 400 lines of code with bit manipulation in it, and they're like, this is how you do accessibility in custom views. I'm like, oh God.
Yeah, I'm
So
not
that
using.
only happens if people really ask for it.
I haven't used accessibility a lot. I mean, I haven't invested much effort into accessibility. I did use accessibility to kind of implement features which are not about accessibility. And I think Google lately like cracks up on application that tries to use accessibility for all kinds of other features, basically abusing kind of accessibility, even though like much of that stuff like controlling some of the hardware buttons, um, basically knowing when some hardware buttons are invoked and overriding their behavior doesn't seem that awful to me. But well, anyways. Okay, and then we have the schedule view model. We get basically labels for days. What I don't like here is that it looks like they construct this user interface, which is like, okay, there is some data here, but it's not like the most complex user interface that you would ever find. It looks like they constructed in multiple steps, fetching data and merging data from multiple sources. I will just basically make one single use case, like to get all this data, times, titles, sessions, whatever, and I will just bind it all together to the view and render it in one go. I don't think it should take much time. There's no need to break the construction of this UI into multiple states. What do you think about this?
Well, it's a bit mysterious that the view model provides the labels for the view pagers in such a separate way. Um, yeah, these things, they should most likely be combined. Hmm. I haven't made my mind up about it.
Okay, so basically that's all for lifecycle, and then we have like update filters UI. What does it do?
Actually, now that you mention it, I think they need this at all because they are running that access of time utils that conference days in a coroutine, like asynchronously, even though it's a static global that is always available. If they
Mm-hmm.
didn't need to do that, then this wouldn't even be async.
Yeah, but I mean, why not? For example, you have a use case, let's call it, I don't know, fetch conferences data use case, and it returns to you a list, a data structure which contains days, list of conference talks, I don't know, times, their time, whatever you need to construct this UI. And then basically every time something changes, you just take all of that and you just rebind everything to your UI. If you want to, you can implement, how do you call that, diff for recycler view to
Diff
not
util?
diff utils. Yeah, you can implement diff utils to make it nice transitions out, in, additions, etc. But I really don't know why would you want to communicate between the view layer and the controller, in this case view model. Why would you want to break the communication? If there is one single piece of data that you want to display, coherent piece of data, then just display it. Unless of course maybe there's some kind of offline behavior involved. So maybe if they're offline, they want to show just part of this information. Then it would make sense to maybe break it into separate data sets. But otherwise, I always try to minimize the amount of communication between view and a model. And if it means that I need to make a relatively complex data structure, well, no problem. I mean, usually it doesn't matter much if you go to the server to fetch 100 bytes of data or 1 kilobyte or 5 kilobytes of data. If you go above that, yes, sure, maybe you need to think about, especially if you work in third, like in markets with where bandwidth is still mattered, or maybe bandwidth is not good enough, the connectivity is not good enough. But otherwise, especially for something as simple as that, just refetch everything from the server. There's really no, or from the local database. There's no need to break your UI into pieces. So update filters UI. It's called when has any filters changes. Okay, really, like I got a feeling that this view model, it works in kind of passive aggressive. It plays tricks. Like I won't tell you what to do, but just for your information, filters changed. Do something about that. So basically this view model, it's not even controller. It's some kind of passive aggressive, and then the fragment handles everything. Fragment handles UI, and fragment knows what to do when some stuff in in the state of the application changes. So you don't really have any kind of MVX pattern here really. You do have view model classes, but it's not MVVM, it's not MVP, it's not MVC. It's just basically the same all code inside fragment approach. Pretty much the same.
Except half of it is in the view model.
Yeah,
Kind
but
of. Is it the half of it?
in
I don't think it's the half of it.
no, it's schedule view model is actually very big. It's like 500 lines of code, including comments and empty spaces. But half of that is just this this live data, which you need to just pass notifications here and there. View model doesn't do much here, to be honest, except for I don't know
Running
what
that
it.
use case, which is free use cases at the moment, yeah. And round trips from the data binding layout to the
Yeah,
fragment.
this one toggle filter. Um, Toggle filter is called from binding adapter. Well, data binding again. So whenever
Oh,
something is triggered, you call this toggle filter, and then when filter is my events, you basically show only pinned events and whatever it means, And if something changed, what's changed? Okay, this probably returns some value. Yep. So they return true if something changed, and if something changed, you go and in the middle you persist the filters, refresh. Okay, basically what you do is you refresh some kind of filter, and then you want to refresh all the state. And to refresh all the state, you need to go through all these operations. And that's what I said. If something changes, just you need to have one single place where you just say it like fetch all information from scratch, and you don't need to go and do it in every single of these methods. Yeah, again, so now we have clear filters, and the functionality in these clear filters is probably in part duplicated with this toggle filter.
Can we check what update filter observables does? Update filter state observables, because I get the feeling that what they are looking for here is the live data switch map, and then they wouldn't need to manually do update observables when the filter changed. It's more like it would automatically be triggered on. Yeah, these are all live data. So, I'm sure there's a better way to do that, but it's fine. Let's go with that.
Yep, and actually, like, if you need to do that, maybe the better approach would be to use one single live data and create one single data structure that would encapsulate these different pieces of information together, and then at least you wouldn't need to use these live data in parallel, because I'm pretty much sure that there's a big overlap between usages of these three. So just duplicating, writing three times what you could write once, and actually make the code more readable by giving this data structure, which aggregates all this information together, some meaningful name. Again, lost opportunity to extract useful abstraction. Okay, and here we've seen that on back pressed, and then on user interaction. Guard against a crash. Rarely observed the method was called before the view model was initialized.
Very interesting. Where do they initialize the schedule view model? Is it in onCreate?
I think they initialized it in onCreate view for some reason.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
That could explain it, although it's tricky for sure. It's better if they do it in onCreate. It's safer. I think that's the real fix to this problem.
I totally agree with you. You need to do, basically, you need to do dependency injection, and that's what they're trying to do here. It's not very clear from all the mess here, but they are really trying to do dependency injection of view model inside into this fragment, and everything related to dependency injection should happen inside onCreate. Therefore, after onCreate method is completed, either in fragment or activity, your fragment or activity needs to be fully initialized with all its collaborators. It's still not active because it becomes active only after on start, and if it's fragment, then it still doesn't have its view hierarchy because view hierarchy is initialized in onCreate view. But if you have any kind of collaborators, be it use cases or view models or helpers, whatever it is, then all of that should be injected basically inside onCreate.
Definitely not onCreate view. It runs multiple times.
Yeah, but in this case they will get the same, like they will get the same object, but it's still very bad pattern.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see what we've got here. So, and then they need, the method was called, well, this user has interacted stuff. And they check it in some places, and I couldn't understand why they need that. Now I understand why they need it, because they screwed up something about lifecycle, and instead of fixing that, they added this boolean flag. And that's actually like very common approach in legacy code bases that I see. Something doesn't work, and then instead of fixing that something doesn't work, you get all these kind of mysterious variables being spread across the code base. And sometimes you think, well, this this is not needed, like it's not used, and you remove that, and then the application doesn't work. And no one knows why they need that, but everybody just too afraid to touch this stuff because like no documentation, no one understands. If you get to this point where you need to employ hacks like this one, just stop. This will not work. I mean, again, this is a simple application. It won't need it to be maintained. They work on it for a couple of months. There are no clients. No one will complain about that. You don't add features to that, to this code base that often, but you guys out there, you probably work on business application, real value, real users, real money being spent on maintaining them. So don't employ these hacks. They will bite you in the ass sooner or later. All right, and then we have these methods, which are just like basically these are the methods, these are the calls that uh, should have been put inside controllers. But again, since view model cannot have transitive reference to context, these calls need to happen here inside the fragment. So none of that belongs to fragment really. And then we have this schedule adapter. Well, I think that was like, what do you think, Gabor? I think we're past, yeah, we're past our time already.
Yeah, but it was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, in some sense, some masochistic sense, it was interesting. Um, I think that was a really good code review. We've seen a lot of stuff, and I learned a lot, especially about all these life cycles and companies that I didn't know much about. Um, One thing is sure from this code. Again, there are some good pieces to it, but generally speaking, it's way too complicated for what it does. That's my general feeling from this code. It's just way too complicated. It feels like all this fragment, it has very simple use cases and very simple requirements, and I don't see why you would need this amount of code and this amount of back and forth between different components to make it work. Well, what's your summary about this screen?
My summary.
Yeah, your feelings.
My feelings were the same. That's why I was nodding all this time. The trick here is that people always say that this is MVVM, or at least it tries to be, because there's a view model in it, right? But if you check what the Jetpack team said about a year ago about view model, they said that view model was not designed for MVVM. It was designed to be a data cache to make data survive across configuration changes. So that's where your data should generally go. So the fact that people started moving navigation logic into the view model and don't like writing code into the fragments, so instead it's moved into the XML, sometimes using data binding, you just spread complexity between three components. One of them is an XML, and most of the logic you get is orchestration between the components. So I tend to look at this and say that with all these event observers that are really just trying to tell the fragment exactly what to do, it could as well be in the fragment and you would get better code that's easier to maintain. The view model was not designed for this, and I think it's primarily because of the mismatched lifecycle between the view model and the fragment. Due to that, the view model is retained and the fragment is not.
Yeah.
So it doesn't work as well with actual UI controlling. It's good for retaining state, it's good for running background jobs, but it's not good for navigation unless you have something in place that you can invoke, and that thing enqueues that navigation action and the fragment registers. but it's not like navigate to sign in action and then 4 lines of code
Yeah.
plus 4 lines of code
Basically,
for
you mean
each
passive
method
aggressive.
call.
Again, passive aggressive, kind of
Yes.
event bus. You hint at event bus here.
Yes, live data is an event bus. Like it's a
Yeah.
sticky event. It's a sticky event that registers in onStart and unregisters in onStop. So when we say event bus is deprecated, we should use live data. No, live data is the same concept. Same for a behavior relay. Like live data is sticky events, which is why it doesn't work for navigation, because you don't want to use sticky events for navigation. So
Okay.
yeah, there's a lot of complexity here that could be reduced with slightly better abstractions. I think the major issue here is that, as you said, there are these dialog dispatchers that could reduce this problem, but they are not really used. They are only invoked by the fragment directly. If the view model could invoke those and the fragment would register to them to get the events when there are pending events, but without having to use event observer, then it would be much cleaner.
Okay, and we've got some questions. Maybe just 5 minutes
Oh,
to
okay.
browse through
Oh,
some.
definitely.
Why there is a lot of stuff going on in the chat, guys. You're awesome. We are very glad that there are people watching that. Well, but half of the messages are from Mitch, but still, Mitch, thank you. Okay, let's see. Uh, Prempal Singh. Oh, I'm sorry for probably killing your name, mispronouncing it. I'm really bad at that. What are your favorite open source Android apps? Something to look up to for good architectural practices. Yeah, Gabor, do you have something to recommend?
Unfortunately, I always forget the one I vaguely remembered. So just a second. Maybe Chrome remembers in my place. Maybe.
Okay, meanwhile, while you are searching, um, I don't think I have any kind of open source real production application that I can point to, but I have a architecture course, and the tutorial application that I wrote is open source. This application is really simple. It's even simpler than IO scheduler and than this Android Dev Summit app. So it's really just a tutorial application, but it does show how I would approach this task. And it has like all the standard elements. It has this recycler view and master detail layout and a little bit of dialogues and stuff. So, Gabor, what do you have?
Mm, to be honest, I can't seem to find it, so maybe later as a tweet. The problem is I tend to write samples typically when I get fed up with not finding what I'm looking for. But right now, I didn't really write samples, and I don't keep track of any for architectural patterns. Like the one sample that I always tend to link, even though it's like 4 years old, is Instamaterial, because that's not for architecture stuff, that's not for Jetpack stuff, it's just for interesting approaches for how to create complex UI and animations even without the material components.
Yeah.
So
Well,
that's what I keep track of in my head, but not architectural ones. I can do some shameless plug and send in something that resembles what we kind of work with, but it's not a real app, it's a sample. Like I write samples when I just cannot find what I'm looking for.
yeah, and several people over in the chat they ask us about review of a played app. Um, so I don't know, guys. We might do that. It depends on the current state of events because in some sense it's the fact that we are all sitting at homes which drove us to do these live code reviews. So we will think about that. Why not? And by the way, Pablo asked about this project that I referred to, so I put this link inside comment section. So with that, thank you very much for joining us, me and Gabor. And now I realize that Gabor, I didn't prepare this view where we will be together. So it's either me or you now. So thank you very much for viewing us, and it was really fun. Thanks to Gabor for joining. Gabor, it was really great, and thank you for sharing your
I'm happy
expertise.
to be here, and thank you for inviting me at all.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm glad to
And
have been here.
yeah, and folks, well, we will see about how things progress, and maybe we will do review of Played Up. Two commenters asked about review of Played Up. Maybe we will do that one day. So thank you all, and leave your questions or comments inside YouTube. And maybe Gabor just uh, probably they know how to find me because they're on my YouTube channel. But how can they find you?
Oh yeah, I am omnipresent on Reddit, and I'm also on Twitter. So just a second. I have too many tabs again. So on Twitter, I am Zhuinden, and on Reddit, I am omnipresent on the Android developer subreddit. The subreddit, and you can pretty much find me on any of these places. Um, I used to write Medium articles as well, but I only do those like when I feel like it, which seems to be
Yeah.
once 3 months. So
Yeah, you didn't write
yeah.
Medium articles though. You write outstanding articles on Medium.
Oh yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah,
Thank
Medium
you.
Medium articles sounds like average articles. They're not average. Okay,
Yeah.
and yes, and
Oh, that's what you mean. I mean, yes,
yeah, that
articles on medium.com. And as Hungary is not supported on Stripe, they are always freely available. They are not premium, they are not behind paywall.
yeah.
So
So
that's
guys,
something to
thank
keep
you
in
very
mind.
much. Thank you very much again for joining us. It was real fun and pleasure. I hope you learned something from this review. And next time when people accuse me of being just hating everything, I can tell that I have on record saying that view binding is alright. Right? It's actually pretty good. Yeah, Gabor, you have a chance to say goodbye. It's your camera now.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed my commentary as well as Vasily's. We typically agreed on the complexity versus the actual functionality that is being provided. But nonetheless, I really hope that we will have that Played application review. No, although knowing that Played is mostly about UI, there's a good chance that we'll mostly see UI hacks there, which is necessary when you use material components and shared element transitions and use all that stuff, which sometimes works. But they know what they're doing because they're the ones who work on it. Um, yeah, and maybe
Great.
vector asset, vector animations too.
Great. So we have something to look up for. Thank you guys, and be safe, stay safe. Write something in comments if you want to, and yeah, that's all. Bye bye, everybody.
Yeah.